My name is Maya Lewis. I'm 33. And 3 months ago, my mother handed the $6.4 million company I'd built over 11 years to my older sister like it was a birthday present. We were sitting in a waterfront bistro in Seattle, linen napkins, dim lights, the whole special occasion vibe, when my mom slid a thick folder across the table, smiled, and said, "We've decided your sister will be taking over the company from here. It's the logical choice. She has a family. She needs something secure." Before I could even process the sentence, my dad leaned in, met my eyes, and added, like he was explaining tax brackets, "You'll report to her. It's fair, Maya. She's got kids to think about." I remember my fork clattering against the plate a bit too loud. The couple at the next table glanced over. My sister pressed her lips together, we trying and failing not to look pleased. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I let out a short, disbelieving laugh, pushed my chair back, nodded as if they'd just announced a reorg at a staff meeting, and walked out of that restaurant without touching the dessert I'd been looking forward to all week. 11 years of all-nighters, client pitches, payroll stress, and contract negotiations had just been reduced to a single idea. You can keep doing the work, but your sister gets the power because she had children and you didn't. On paper, the company had always technically belonged to my mother. She had the banking relationships, the spotless credit score, the reassuring presence on loan applications. She told me over and over it was just a formality. I thought work and loyalty would protect me. I was wrong. And they assumed I'd get over it, swallow my pride, and slip into the role they'd written for me, doing the heavy lifting while my sister collected the credit. Instead, I vanished from their plans, took what was actually mine, and started moving in ways they never saw coming. 3 months after that dinner, it was my parents and my sister calling my phone back to back, asking me to fix the disaster they'd made. If you want to know how the business they took from me almost dragged them under with it, and how walking away turned into the sharpest revenge I could have imagined, start at the beginning. Growing up, I was the strong one. In my family, that was code for the one we assume will be fine without help. We lived in a cul-de-sac outside Tacoma, Washington. Cookie-cutter suburbs, kids on bikes until the streetlights flicked on. Lawns my dad insisted on mowing in perfect lines. My mom, Linda, worked her way up to branch manager at a regional bank. My dad, Robert, was a civil engineer who always had half-rolled blueprints on the kitchen table. My sister, Jenna, is 4 years older than me and has been the designated golden child since birth. She was the honor roll, student council, yearbook editor type the kid teachers would gesture toward with a stack of graded papers and say, "You should aim for this." If Jenna forgot her lunch, Mom would leave work to drop it at school. If I forgot mine, Mom said, "You're resourceful. Grab something from the cafeteria. You'll manage." At first, the favoritism was the sort of thing you can rationalize. Jenna got the newer clothes, the bigger bedroom with more light, the first smartphone. But I got hand-me-downs and a reputation for being low maintenance. Then Jenna moved to Chicago after college, slid into HR at a big healthcare corporation, and the gap between us went from irritating to structural. Mom flew out to help her move into her first high-rise studio, took a whole week off to assemble IKEA furniture and alphabetize her spices. When Jenna wanted to buy a condo, Mom wired money for the down payment and called it investing in stability. She co-signed on Jenna's car, paid for Jenna's master's in organizational leadership without blinking. When I brought up my own college costs, Mom looked at the stack of envelopes on the counter and said, "You're smart, Maya. Apply for scholarships, work a bit, you'll figure it out." The same tone you'd use to tell someone to pick up milk on the way home. So I did. I stacked scholarships like Jenga blocks, worked at a campus coffee shop and in the computer lab, did homework during 15-minute breaks, and tried not to fall asleep in lectures. Then Jenna's high-risk pregnancy turned her from favorite child into eternal priority. There were complications, hospital stays, scary doctor updates. I don't begrudge her that part. It was terrifying. But once she became the sister who almost didn't make it, and then the mom of the miracle baby, every decision in our family ran through one filter. What about Jenna and the kids? I remember one weekend clearly. I was home for finals from the University of Washington. I had 2 exams and a project due. Mom got a call that Jenna's blood pressure had spiked. Within an hour, she'd thrown clothes into a suitcase, canceled everything. Warren was on her way to SeaTac to catch a red-eye. She hugged me in passing at the front door and said, "You'll be okay, right?" Jenna really needs me. She didn't ask if I needed a ride back to campus or if I had money for groceries that week. After that, the dynamic calcified. When I won a regional design competition my junior year and got invited to an awards night in downtown Seattle, I printed the email and stuck it on the fridge. Mom promised she'd be there, said she was proud of me. The morning of the thing later, okay? You know how much your thing later, okay? You know how much your sister has on her plate. Dad came alone that night. He clapped loud when they called my name, took a blurry photo, and told me he was proud. Then he shrugged and said, "You know how your mom is with your sister after everything she went through." That sentence, "after everything she went through," became a free pass for every lopsided choice. When Jenna got promoted, Mom sent her flowers, a handwritten card, and a generous restaurant gift card. When I landed my first paid freelance project designing social posts for a local gym, Mom said, "That's cute, but is it stable? Is it a real career?" Jenna needed help with daycare. Mom dipped into savings. When my 4-year-old laptop died a month before graduation and I asked if she could help me replace it, she sighed and said, "Can't your dad sort that out? I've already stretched myself so much for your sister." Dad and I found a used laptop on Craigslist. He paid cash, and I apologized for not being able to do more, and I pretended not to care when the battery died at 40%. Somewhere between those small cuts, I stopped expecting my mother to show up for my milestones the way she did for Jenna's. I invited her less, I celebrated more with friends, and quietly with Dad. Instead of chasing her approval, I poured that friction into learning. Design, storytelling, social media, branding. I spent so many nights hunched over that flickering laptop screen, half frozen in my off-campus apartment, teaching myself how to build websites, write copy, edit short videos. I took any tiny job that let me practice. Flyers for student clubs, menus for food trucks, logos for friends' side hustles. While others were out drinking, I was tweaking color palettes and studying which posts got shared and which ones died. Yeah, I loved it. But under the satisfaction was an ache, the knowledge that no matter how good I got, at home I would always be the one who will be fine next to the one with kids. So I made myself a quiet promise. If no one in this house was ever going to bet on me like they bet on Jenna, I'd bet on myself. I'd build something so solid they couldn't pretend not to see it. What I didn't realize was that the same mother who never fully believed my work was real would one day use that work as a financial asset to hand to someone else. After college, when my classmates were scrubbing their resumes and refreshing job boards, I rented a desk in a noisy co-working space in downtown Seattle with scratchy carpet and free but terrible drip coffee. I had an aging laptop, a thrift store backpack, wore in a handful of clients who paid me in tiny invoices and free smoothies. I spent a week trying to name the thing I was building. I wanted something that sounded like it could be on the door of a glass office one day, not just in my Instagram bio. I settled on Meridian Storyworks. Meridian because I like the idea of a line that everything else orients around. Storyworks because that's what we did. Took messy founder narratives and shaped them into something people could care about. At first, Meridian was just me creating content and basic branding for yoga studios, boutique gyms, one local artisan bakery, a couple of SaaS founders who hated writing. I undercharged. Badly. I treated every client email like it was life or death. I said yes to everything and slept badly worrying the work would disappear if I ever pushed back. When I tried to open a business account and apply for a small line of credit to smooth cash flow, the bank officer looked at my age, my irregular revenue, my thin credit file, and handed me a polite rejection. That's when my mother slid into the story. "Let me help," she said over dinner one Sunday, in the same tone she used with anxious customers at her branch. "I do this all day. We can structure it in a way lenders like." She explained that if she formed the LLC and was majority owner, for now, using her decades-long relationship with the bank, we could secure better terms, real business checking, a credit line, maybe even an office loan eventually. She talked about liability, lending policies, compliance. I had read some blog posts and skimmed a few legal templates, but honestly, I just wanted to make campaigns and pay my rent. "It's just paperwork," she said. "You're still in charge. You're the engine. I'm just the chassis. We're a team." I believed her. We met in her kitchen. She spread out printed forms, highlighted where I had to sign, and I scrawled my name and initials in a dozen places that meant less than the next client proposal in my inbox. On paper, Linda Lewis became 80% owner and managing member of Meridian Storyworks, LLC. I kept 20% as junior partner. In reality, I was the one sending invoices at midnight and answering frantic client texts at 6 a.m. The first few years were ugly behind the scenes. I lived in a studio with thin walls and a neighbor who practiced trombone at odd hours. I lived on cheap pho, supermarket sushi on good weeks, and boxed mac and cheese on bad ones. I bought secondhand monitors and used cracked free tools until I could afford proper software. One winter, my heat broke for 5 days. I worked in fingerless gloves, a blanket wrapped around my legs, editing a product video for a founder who forgot to pay my invoice for 6 weeks. But the work itself started to click. A campaign I ran for a local electric scooter company worked way better than any of us expected. Instead of talking about specs, we told stories about people ditching cars, discovering parts of the city they'd never explored. It resonated. They shared. Referrals trickled in. I realized there was a gap. Climate and mobility companies that were brilliant at code and hardware, awful at human storytelling. So I leaned in. I reworked our site to focus on clean tech and conscious brands. I went to niche conferences in Portland and Vancouver, sat at folding tables with a printed banner and a bowl of cheap candy, and talked to anyone who stopped long enough to listen. I sat through awkward networking mixers in hotel bars, learned to introduce myself without sounding like I was apologizing for existing, and followed up on LinkedIn like my life literally depended on it. Bit by bit, Meridian shifted from Maya doing social to an actual small agency. I hired a copywriter laid off from a big agency who still had a bruised ego, but a killer portfolio. Then a video editor who made our rough storyboards into actual cinematic pieces. Later, a data-obsessed strategist who brought spreadsheets into every meeting and saved us from guessing. We crammed into a small office in a renovated brick building in Pioneer Square, flickering fluorescent lights but our logo on the door. Every time I signed a new lease or negotiated a bigger deal, my mom would say, "Good thing we did the paperwork, right? Banks love seeing my name on those forms." She said it half jokingly, half proud. I laughed along because I thought we were on the same side. She popped into the office a few times a quarter, said hello to people, asked about revenue, then left before strategy or creative came up. She liked saying, "My daughter and I run a digital agency at barbecues." My dad would drop by, look at a montage of our work on a big screen and say, "Look at this empire you've built, kiddo." Then add, "Just promise me you'll slow down enough to have a life someday. What, maybe kids of your own in a few years?" As if the 30 paychecks I signed every month didn't count as taking care of lives. Meanwhile, my sister in Chicago half watched it all on social media. She'd say things at Thanksgiving like, "Must be wild doing gig work full time." I'd be too anxious, and then ask me to make her resume look more modern. By our 10th year, Meridian was bringing in around $4 million annually. We moved into a light-filled space on the 14th floor of a downtown tower with glass wall meeting rooms, plants that somehow stayed alive, and a corner view of Elliott Bay. We had about 28 employees, health benefits, a basic 401k, and a Friday tradition of ordering too much Thai food if we hit a big milestone. The year we crossed $6.4 million in revenue, I sat alone in the office one night, the city glittering below, and stared at the number on the year-end report until my eyes blurred. I had done exactly what I promised myself I would do. I had built something so solid that even my mother couldn't deny it. She called to say she was proud, told me how smart it was that we'd set the company up under her umbrella, that her experience had been crucial. I thanked her. I believed her contribution was real. I never imagined that the signatures she'd collected at her kitchen table would be used to legally declare that the company I'd built was hers to gift. The year everything cracked didn't start with Meridian. It started with my parents' marriage. After decades of ignoring the obvious, they finally separated. What shocked me wasn't that it happened, but how quickly lawyers turned their life into spreadsheets, house equity, retirement accounts, stock vehicles. One by one, everything got assessed and split. Whenever Meridian came up, my mom's voice shifted. She called it my business to her attorney, talked about the risk she'd taken putting it in her name, about how it would fund her retirement. My dad sat through those conversations looking like a guest at someone else's party. I could tell he still thought of it as Maya's thing with some help from Mom. On paper, though, it was simple. Linda owned 80% of a valuable company. Robert did not. When the divorce was final, Dad walked away with half the house proceeds and his share of retirement. My mom kept Meridian completely outside the marital pot, as if she alone had created it. One afternoon, among the folders on the kitchen table, she said, "This business is going to be what keeps me comfortable in my old age. We're you and I, we built it." The you and I stung, but I swallowed it. I told myself I didn't care who had their name where as long as I ran day to day. Then along came Dale. He was a real estate developer from Austin with a shaved head, white teeth, and the kind of watch you notice. Mom met him at a financial planning seminar. Within a year, they were engaged. He started visiting Seattle, talking about opportunities in mixed-use developments, how mid-size agencies like Meridian could add value to his projects. I tried to be gracious. I went to dinner. I listened to his stories about flipping entire apartment complexes. I answered his half-serious questions about whether Meridian could help brand his new building. Then I came by my mom's condo one afternoon and overheard a speakerphone conversation. Someone from a bank was explaining how pledging a profitable service business as part of a collateral package could improve the terms on Dale's latest commercial loan. I froze in the hallway. Mom saw me, hit the button, and chirped, "We'll call you back!" before practically shoving the phone under a cushion. My stomach went cold. A few months later, they had a small destination wedding in Austin. Jenna flew in with her husband and 2 kids. My dad did not. I stood under a live oak tree with sweating guests, watching my mother promise forever to a man who saw my company not as my life's work, but as leverage. When we got back to Seattle, Mom suggested a family strategy dinner. "I want everyone on the same page," she said, "about the future." She booked a table at a trendy fusion place on the waterfront. We made polite talk through appetizers. Jenna scrolled her phone between bites, her kids' photos as her lock screen. Dale ordered the most expensive wine. Dad looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Then Mom took a folder out of her bag and placed it in the center of the table. "We've been doing some long-term planning," she said. "Succession, estate planning. We have to think ahead." She talked about being in her early 60s, about wanting to travel more, about not wanting to be chained to the office forever. My heart actually lifted for a second. I thought, irrationally, she was about to say she was transferring legal ownership to me, making what we'd all acted like true on paper. Instead, she turned to Jenna with that soft, almost worshipful look and said, "We've decided Jenna will be taking over Meridian." She said it like announcing who'd won the baby shower guessing game. "She has the MBA, she has management experience, and she has 2 children to support. This will finally give her the security she deserves." I stared at her. "What?" Mom launched into the pitch. She and Dale had met with a lawyer and financial advisor. They'd shifted voting control, signatory authority, and majority membership from her to Jenna. It was all done. Her 80% was now mostly Jenna's. I'd be taking care of it, of course. They pictured me stepping into a high-level role, chief creative, chief operating officer, under Jenna. I'd keep doing what I do best while Jenna took the reins. My dad, of all people, chimed in. "Look, kiddo," he said, as if explaining a hard but necessary move. "You're single. You rent, no dependents. Jenna has a mortgage and kids. It's only fair she gets the legacy piece. You're talented. You'll thrive no matter what title you have." There it was, not even subtle. My life's work versus her motherhood. I glanced at the folder, my fate rubber-banded together, and realized something planet-size. I had never really owned what I thought was mine, and the people whose names I'd trusted on the paperwork had just proved they valued Jenna's status as a mother more than my decade of building. I laughed. It came out sharp and small and made Jenna swallow her smile. "If that's your decision," I said, standing up, "you can see how it goes without me." I left, no scene, no threats, just a clean exit. On the drive back to my apartment, my phone buzzed over and over, Mom, Dad, Jenna, in that order. You messages about me overreacting, you not understanding the big picture, letting down the family. I turned the phone face down and kept driving. Rage roared through me in one wave and then quiet. Underneath the anger was something more useful. Calculation. By the time I parked, I knew roughly where I stood. I had just under $400,000 in personal savings and investments, years of a founder's salary, modest bonuses, and some lucky buys in green energy stocks. No kids, no mortgage, a 10-year-old Subaru without payments, monthly expenses I knew down to the dollar. My mother and sister could keep the shell of the thing they'd just claimed. I would take my mind, my reputation, my relationships, and start again somewhere I owned every inch. The next morning, I went into the office like always. I didn't tell my team what happened. I walked past the logo on the glass, watched people I respected juggling calls and deadlines, while my sister sat in a conference room with Mom, peering at a spreadsheet like it was written in a foreign language. At noon, I sent my resignation. It was 3 sentences long. I thanked everyone for the last 11 years. I said I was stepping down, effective immediately. I attached a clean, detailed transition document for every active client and major project. I copied my parents, no anger, no drama, just a surgical cut. Then I went home, opened my own laptop, and started something new. Within a week, I'd registered a new company, Northlight Collective. I hired a real lawyer this time, a woman in her 40s who had built and sold her own agency and now ran a boutique firm for creatives. We sat in her small office with view of a parking lot, and I told her everything. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she said calmly, "We're going to put this in writing so no one can ever do that to you again." Northlight Collective, LLC, was 100% mine. We set up a shareholders agreement with clauses about transfers and voting, opened accounts that lived separate from my personal life, put guardrails everywhere. No for convenience signatures, no secret majority owner. I rented a bright little space in a shared building near South Lake Union. 1 room, 2 desks, a cheap IKEA table, and plants I wasn't sure how to keep alive. For the first 2 weeks, it was just me and the echo of my own footsteps. It should have felt like a massive step backward after Meridian's glass walls and 30 people. Instead, it felt clean. Here with Maya and her team, not Meridian with Maya and her team, not Meridian in the abstract. I called them one by one. I didn't trash my family. I didn't beg. I said some version of, "There's been an ownership change at my last agency. I've made the difficult decision to leave and start my own firm, Northlight Collective. If you'd like to keep working with me, I'd be honored. If you'd rather stay, I completely understand." I put the choice in their hands. Roughly 7 out of 10 said, "Where do we sign?" The rest thanked me for being honest, said they needed time, or stayed until their contracts ended and then quietly emailed from a personal account saying, "Is the door still open?" 3 of my strongest people handed in their notice at Meridian within a month. My strategy director, our lead video producer, and our performance marketing lead. We cobbled together desks in my tiny office. They took temporary pay cuts. We brewed terrible coffee in a $20 machine, used folding chairs, and wrote strategy on the back of printer paper. But the air in that room crackled in a way I hadn't felt in years. We weren't patching someone else's mistakes. We were building on purpose. Around that time, a friend who ran a small online summit for founders asked if I'd do a session on founders and boundaries. I hesitated. I didn't want to humiliate my family in public, but I realized I could tell the story without names, without calling Meridian out. So I told it. I talked about building a multi-million-dollar agency under paperwork that didn't match reality, about how lovingly worded just paperwork can turn into a legal trap, about walking away and starting from zero in my 30s. Someone clipped 10 minutes of that talk and posted it on LinkedIn under the title, "She built a $6.4 million agency she didn't own. Here's what she did next." It spread. Not viral, but far enough. Comments from founders who'd let a spouse, a boyfriend, a parent sit on their cap table for convenience. From freelancers who'd signed terrible contracts because they were grateful for any work. A few CMOs messaged me directly. "If you've navigated that," one wrote, "and you're still in this game, I want you on our side." Those messages turned into discovery calls. Some of those turned into contracts. While my parents were telling themselves I'd cool down and come back, I was sitting in a small office with secondhand chairs looking at Northlight's first quarterly revenue and realizing I had already outrun the version of myself who'd accepted scraps. While Northlight found its feet, Meridian began to wobble. At first, it was just off notes in the background. A former colleague texted that Jenna had cut our usual research and discovery phases in half because she thought they were fluff. An old client called, not to sign with me, but to vent. Something's off over there, he said. The new leadership talks about efficiency, and KP is, but the work feels shallow. Nobody's listening. Designers still at Meridian sent me late-night messages saying they were being asked to approve things way above their pay grade because no one at the top understood the details. On paper, Jenna had Senior Vice President of People Operations on a resume. In practice, she was in way over her head. She wanted to prove she was decisive, so she started moving deadlines up arbitrarily, promising launch dates without consulting the people doing the work, trimming budgets in all the wrong places. Projects that would have been smooth a year ago now lurched and sputtered. Clients whose accounts I had shepherded for years started quietly testing the waters. Meanwhile, that Texas real estate deal Dale had been so excited about started to unravel. He'd leveraged everything he could reach, his existing properties, and some of my mom's retirement and Meridian's shares as part of the collateral package. As revenue softened and key accounts left, the company looked a lot less attractive on a bank statement. 3 months after the waterfront dinner, my phone lit up with Mom's name in the middle of a Tuesday. For once, I answered. Maya, she said. Her voice had that high, tight edge I associated with angry customers at her old branch. We need to talk. As a family, can you meet us tonight? Who's us? I asked. Your father, Jenna, me, she said. Please, it's important. I almost said no on principle, but my curiosity won. We met at a quiet cafe near the tech hub, neutral territory. They were already there when I arrived. My mom looked tired in a way makeup couldn't hide. My dad's shoulders slumped. Jenna's hoodie sleeves were pushed up, or her nails unpolished for the first time in memory. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Then Jenna opened her mouth. You've put us in a really challenging spot, she started. Clients are following you, staff left because of you. It's unethical. I bit back a laugh. They're adults, I said. They chose. Mom jumped in. Regardless of how it happened, she said, using her professional voice, Meridian is in trouble. The bank is concerned. The covenants on Dale's project are close to being breached. We need you back, Maya. You're the face. The clients trust you. If you came back as COO under Jenna, we could stabilize everything for the family. My dad nodded like a chorus. Sometimes you have to let go of ego for the greater good, he added. Your sister has 2 kids to feed. You're still young. Plus, you don't have the same responsibilities. I asked for details, not out of some obligation, because I wanted the full picture before I said what I already knew I was going to say. They told me more than they probably meant to. How many clients had downgraded or left, the size of the line of credit, the terms on Dale's loan, which accounts were past due. Meridian wasn't just wobbling, it was taking on water fast. You could buy it, Jenna blurted at one point, desperation cracking through the polished HR tone. Mom said we could sign it back if you wanted. You could take control again, fix things, then maybe sell later and we'd all get something out of it. The image flashed through my mind. Me swooping in to reclaim the name I'd invented, the logo I'd designed, tidying up the mess, signing onto loans I'd never agreed to. For about 3 seconds, then I thought for about 3 seconds, then I thought about everything that would come along with that signature. Dale's over-leveraged development, the debt anchored to a brand I no longer trusted. My mother and sister, still convinced their needs outranked my autonomy. No, I said, calm, final. I'm not coming back. Not to clean up, not to work under Jenna, not to buy into a structure you used to cut me out. My mom's eyes filled. We're your parents, she whispered. How can you just watch us struggle? You made business decisions, I said. These are business consequences. I laid a $10 bill on the table for my coffee, picked up my bag, and left. 18 months later, Meridian Storyworks no longer existed as an independent agency. It was sold to a larger firm for what insiders quietly call a distress price. The buyer wanted a few remaining client contracts and some equipment. They didn't care about the origin story. The check barely covered the debts tied to Dale's failed project and the remaining line of credit. There was nothing left to treat as a retirement golden egg. Dale faded out of the picture not long after. Men like him rarely stick around when the spreadsheets turn red. My mom sold the sleek condo in Austin, moved back to Washington, and rented a modest one-bedroom near the bus line. She picked up part-time consulting work for small credit unions. Her LinkedIn headline still mentioned co-founder, but it no longer changed what she went home to at night. My dad took more small engineering consult gigs than he'd planned to in his 60s to make up for what he hadn't fought for during the divorce. Jenna and her family had to sell the suburban house they'd stretched to afford. They moved into a rented townhouse with less light and a smaller yard. She emailed me once, asking if Northlight might be hiring a head of people. I told her truthfully that our HR needs were already covered, because my team deserved a workplace that wasn't haunted by my family's unfinished business. By then, Northlight Collective had grown to 50 people. We'd moved into a larger space, exposed brick, plants, a messy wall of whiteboards. Our client list included clean energy startups in Europe, a national mobility brand, and a couple of B Corp I'd idolized in my 20s. Our annual revenue had passed $13 million and was climbing. I found myself on small stages at tech conferences in places like Austin and Toronto, introduced as the founder who rebuilt after losing everything on paper. Standing there with our logo behind me, I realized something simple and massive. They hadn't actually taken everything. They'd taken a name, a tax ID number, some furniture, and a domain. The asset they'd underestimated, me, had walked out the door intact. Back in Seattle, my personal life unspooled in a way that felt quieter and more grounded than any of the drama had. I was dating Aaron, a back-end engineer I'd met at a climate tech meetup. He knew the whole messy story and never once told me to just get over it. He respected my boundaries with my family, my focus on the business, my need for a life that didn't revolve around anyone else's idea of what a 30-something woman should be doing. We talked about travel, maybe kids someday, maybe not. But none of it was pitched as what would make me more deserving of anything. One afternoon, I ran into my mother at a grocery store in Ballard in front of the avocados. She looked smaller, like the weight of the last few years had finally settled. We chatted about nothing important, the weather, my dad, Jenna's kids. She started to apologize in half-formed phrases, then stopped. I didn't rescue her from the awkwardness. A few weeks later, I dropped off an old but decent laptop at her apartment, the kind of machine she'd bought me long ago that I'd built my early portfolio on. It was wiped clean. I left a note on top. Thank you for helping me get started. I've got it from here. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't revenge. It was a line. What happened to my family wasn't magic karma. It was what eventually happens when you treat people like leverage instead of partners, when you mistake legal ownership for moral entitlement, when you assume the person who always figures it out will keep doing it, no matter how many times you move the goalposts. My success wasn't payback in the movie sense. It was proof that walking away from people who refuse to see your worth is sometimes the only way to protect your life from being ground down to feed theirs. Here's what I know now. You can love your family and still refuse to hand them your future. You can be grateful for what they did at the start and still say no to what they demand at the middle. You can lose what you thought was everything and still come out ahead because the real value was never the LLC, the office, or the revenue number. The real value was always you. If you're reading this and you've been told to play smaller for the sake of the family or to accept less because someone else needs it more, ask yourself, what would happen if just once you stopped apologizing for your ambition and walked in the direction of the life you actually want? Maybe the scariest part won't be starting over. Maybe the scariest part will be realizing you were the asset all along.